So here we are with part three of our discussion of what is strategy. So essentially what we've done is we've gone down the path to an extent of what are the basics or what are the first few things that we need to consider when we create a strategic plan or the strategy for our company or a company or organization. And we briefly talked about stakeholders, both internal and external. And then when one considers a strategy, you have to do, or it's appropriate to do, a stakeholder impact analysis. And again, this works for profits as well as for not for profits. So, step one, who are the stakeholders, right? Uh, you got to think about who are those internal and external stakeholders. Step two, what are our stakeholders' interests and claims? Three, what opportunities and threats do our stakeholders present? Step four, what economic, legal, ethical, and philanthropic responsibilities do we have to our stakeholders? And step five, what should we do to effectively address the stakeholder concerns? And what I would add to this is who has power and is it legitimate? Because different stakeholders may think that they have no power and so are somewhat disinterested in the strategy. But then some will think they have a lot of power. And is that power that those stakeholders have, legitimate? So we can talk about that in greater detail in class, but these are some of the things that I want you to be thinking about. So the AFI framework, this is set up by the book, and it deals with those acronyms, analysis, formulation, and then implementation. So the analysis of the competitive landscape, the formulation of the strategy, and then the implementation of the strategy through coherent actions. And again, the actions have to be coherent, meaning they work together, they stick together, they make sense. One thing that I do want to step away from, or I want to kind of step back from our discussion, I want you to think about, is so much of what we'll be talking about, or maybe more appropriately, what the book talks about, is competitive advantage. And the book looks through that lens, or looks at competitive advantage through the lens of large, typically publicly traded entities. But so much of what we have out there are small businesses and startups. And I want you to think about this. Let's say you have a startup company, and let's say maybe you've started a company. What is your goal? What is your strategy? Maybe your strategy isn't to have the competitive advantage and to be the dominant force in the industry. Then maybe it's just simply to have fun at what you do, and to make enough money to keep your concern going and to maybe maintain a certain standard of living, whatever that standard of living is. So essentially, happiness, right? So maybe it's for most people, strategy and the consideration of strategy is less about competitive advantage and more about things like happiness and doing what you enjoy. And at the same time, making sure that what you do, if it's a for-profit company, is uh, profitable enough where you can pay your employees, keep your business going, and enjoy some a certain standard of living, whatever that is. So those are all things I want you to think about, and that wraps up our discussion of chapter one of what is strategy.